Happy Halloween, everyone. Welcome to the show. In lieu of the Halloween spirit, I have dressed as a sports reporter. I just felt I couldn't top my Dwayne Johnson costume from Saturday's football broadcast. Anywho, we'll kick things off today with our FCS discussion, one by one at first, and then we'll get all four of our experts on later for a little football fiesta. So we'll start with the University of North Dakota, as I am joined by Alex Heiner from our Grand Forks studios. And Alex, yes, UND lost this past Saturday, but it was a 5-point defeat to Weber State. That's the number 4 team in the country, as you know. UND now sits at 5-3 on the year, a big non-conference road win at Sam Houston State on their resume. How do you rate their playoff chances right now?
Well, I rate them, I think, a lot like I did the week before the loss to Weber State. Those things haven't really changed. Everything is still out in front of this North Dakota team with 3 games remaining. If they win out and get to 8-3, they're in, and they're likely hosting a game that first weekend of the playoffs. Lose one of those games, though, and there goes your playoff chances. Simple as that. Yeah,
meanwhile, we heard from Bubba earlier this week. They have to focus on the challenge Saturday, one game at a time, and it's at Idaho, a team that has not lost at home this year, but Idaho is ranked 101st out of 124 FCS teams for rushing defense, just giving up about 223 yards per game. So is UND licking their chops?
They have to be. Again, coming off a game against Weber State that limited them to 105 yards on the ground after UND had averaged over the last 3 games 371 yards on the ground. They're excited to get back to a team that does not like it when you run the football against them. And you mentioned Idaho. Yes, they've been great at the Kibbe Dome, 3-0, but they've lost all 5 of their road games. They're a struggling team right now, and I think North Dakota is catching them at the right time.
All right, thanks, Alex. We'll see you in a bit. Let's head south down I-29 and talk about the number 1 team in the nation, North Dakota State. For more on that, I'm joined by Brian Sean in West Fargo. Sean, the top team in the nation, perfect 8-0 on the year. And after watching the Bison Saturday, it didn't look like they were in any rush to slow down, but the remaining schedule for NDSU is rather light. And ask anyone in the Valley, even Coach Kleiman commented on it in his press conference earlier this week. It can't overlook anyone in this league. But the final 3 weeks, the Bison have Youngstown at home, they're at Missouri State, and then home versus Southern Illinois. All these teams are 500 or below. None of them have a winning record in the Valley this year. So do you feel that's an advantage or a disadvantage to have a lighter schedule when you're trying to ramp things up heading into playoffs?
Well, I think if it was a younger team, you'd be concerned about, will this team let up, knowing that some of their difficult games, most difficult games, certainly on paper, are behind them. But the one thing Chris Kleiman says after every single press conference after a game, and pretty much every press conference on Monday, is what you did last week has no bearing on what you're going to do this week. And we have our 25 seniors. We're keeping the guys focused. We're still focusing on making sure we get it better every week. But I think it's an advantage, personally, because I think it's an opportunity for North Dakota State, maybe in the second half, to play more guys and take some reps off their starters. The Bison had such an early bye week this year, Kelly, that they've had to go back to back weeks for so long that if they can take care of business, win a share of the Valley title this weekend, maybe play some more guys, get everybody healthy, get the bye week. If they could still stay number 1 and get their bye week going into the playoffs, then everything sets up, I think, really well for North Dakota State here down the road.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And as you know, the FCS Selection Committee is releasing their top 10 tonight at halftime of the Ball State at Toledo game on ESPN2. This is the only time the committee will release its top 10. Unlike last year, they did it weekly throughout November. Obviously, no real concern for NDSU here. We assume SDSU will be in that top 10 as well. But what are your thoughts on how the committee is doing the rankings this year and how it's going to be an unknown situation for teams kind of on the playoff bubble like UND and I guess maybe even USD?
Well, it's going to be a huge guessing game, I think, Kelly, because there's still so much time left. Everybody's got 3 games left. Who knows what's going to happen over the final 3 weeks of the regular season? And I still think a team like South Dakota State that could finish 8-2 potentially. Do you treat them like an 8-2 team, or do you treat them like a 9-2 team or a 7-2 team? It's just such a weird dynamic with them only having 10 games that over the next 3 weeks, the matchups are going to be just looked over so much by people that follow FCS football. That's what is intriguing to me going into this, is I think 2 through 8 right now could really be anybody. I think we know who number 1, at least at this point, definitely is.
Interesting stuff. Thank you, Brian. All right, last but not least, let's head down to South Dakota, a little Sioux Falls gathering here. I'm joined by Tom Neiman and Jay Elson to talk a little bit about the FCS. Tom, we'll start with you, continuing the topic of what I just asked Bishan with the FCS Selection Committee releasing that top 10, and then that's it. All teams get to see, with 3 weeks still remaining in the season, where they're going to be. So how do you feel about the way they're going about this?
It's a big tease more than anything. It's good for conversation, but that's about it because, as Brian said, there's still 3 weeks left in the regular season. Whatever they come out with tonight might be a good snapshot of what it's eventually going to be. In fact, last year when they did this reveal of the top 8 teams, when they did the reveal, 7 of them actually did end up being seeded teams. They were just kind of in different order than what they came out with. So again, whatever they come out with tonight, North Dakota State's going to be number 1, and they're going to stay there until the playoffs get started. Everybody else in those 2 through 8 spots is going to shift around a little bit, but I like the way they do it. I like the excitement of getting to November 18th, I think, is when the selection show is, and then finding out then.
That's approaching fast. All right. Meanwhile, Jay, I know earlier I said to Vishan that potentially USD might earn a playoff berth, but honestly, it's not looking good, which is unfortunate. But as Bob told you earlier this week, they still have something to play for. What is that mental challenge like for this team? Competing hard, knowing the end is in sight, and do you think they can still finish strong?
I absolutely do think they can still finish strong. I wouldn't take any of the possible scenarios over these last 3 weeks off the table. That includes 3-0, 2-1, 1-2, 0-3. I think it's all possible. It just depends on how they do respond mentally, and that's their biggest challenge. We're going to see a lot about what the makeup of this team is in terms of character and heart over these next 3 weeks, and I think basically right now, you're playing for the future of your program more than you are anything else. The playoffs are going to be a tough sell to pretty much anybody at this point. But there's plenty to play for if you really love what you do and who you do it for. And so I think right now that's got to be at the center of what this team is gearing up for.
Yeah, these next few weeks will say a lot about these guys, but I have no doubt they can step up to the challenge. All right, Tommy, back to you. Much of SDSU's success has been fueled by their play at QB. Taryn Christian set yet another record this past weekend for career completions in the win at Illinois State. That was a big one. Is he playing his best football ever?
That's hard to say. His numbers have been so good over the last 2 years as a sophomore and as a junior, but yes, I think he is. He's just making plays. He's making all the right reads. He's just very smart, very mature. He's been banged up a little bit. His left arm has been bothering him, but he's fighting through that this year. And just the maturity that he has shown. He threw an interception in this game at Illinois State, and he put it all on himself. I don't know if that was right or wrong or not, but he's just that mature leader. And yes, he is still a really, really good football player. And his numbers might not match what he's done the last couple of years, but he's going to lead them as far as he can, and the Jacks hope that is a national championship game at least this year.
All right, great stuff. Now we got the band back together for one last quick hitter around the horn. Give me the toughest game left on your team's schedule, and Jay, I only gave you one question earlier, so you get to go first.
Well, I think the toughest and maybe the most important, I think, clearly is the game against South Dakota State, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think right now the focus really needs to be on Indiana State. I hate to be the guy that goes cliche when guys like us really hate that, but right now that's it. And it's for all the reasons we just talked about, Kelly. This is important for the future of your program, and if you're going to rebound and get this thing turned around in time before the end of the season, it's got to start against Indiana State.
All right, Tommy, what do you got?
I should say at Southern Illinois next week, but it is definitely the Coyotes coming up in that last game of the regular season because USD is going to want to stick it to the Jackrabbits. So that is the toughest game South Dakota State has coming up in that last game.
Alex Heiner, what do you think for UND?
Well, none of UND's final 3 opponents have a winning record, but I think the toughest game is probably going to be on the road in Flagstaff against Northern Arizona. Even though NAU's lost 2 in a row, they're the only FCS team to beat Weber State this year. So watch out for the Lumberjacks.
All right, and Brian, NDSU, how do you even answer this?
I would still go say Missouri State. The Bison have never lost in the gold yellow jerseys. They're 27-0, so they're not losing this weekend. They're not losing on Senior Day, last game of the year against Southern Illinois. But I think going to Missouri State over the years, that's been a tough place to play for them. Not a lot of atmosphere in Old Springfield, so I'll go with the Bears.
All right, process of elimination. Great stuff, guys. Thank you, and looking forward to your game previews later on this week.